Marduk, the heroic god of Babylon. When chaos kneels before order, have you ever imagined a god who could see through all illusions, hear the whispers of the universe, and from the ruins of chaos create the whole world? Not Zeus, not Odin, not any mortal hero. It was Marduk, a god who had been forgotten in the dark corners of Babylonian mythology, but who had written the first chapter of the concept of the hero conquering chaos. When the ancient world was still shrouded in darkness and mystery, Mesopotamia, the cradle of human civilization, was already a place of worship for hundreds of gods. There, Marduk was just a minor god, not prominent, not powerful, maybe just a god of fresh water, or associated with health, crops, the flow of life. But like all great legends, true heroes are not born from the throne, but from the most overlooked class. Marduk is a symbol of the ability to rise from obscurity. In a sky as dense as a forest of swords, he quietly prepared for the fateful moment that would change the universe. And Marduk was the answer. Marduk was not only honored, he was elevated. From a local god, he became the king of the gods, the one chosen to confront chaos, rebuilding the universe with wisdom, power, and insight into all truth. There is no creation without destruction. No order is established without bloodshed. And in the Enuma Elish myth, the battle between Marduk and Tiamat is the ultimate symbol of the struggle between primordial chaos and divine order. Tiamat, goddess of the sea, representative of the primal chaos, rebelled against a new generation of gods. She created Kingu, a mighty warrior who gathered monsters to destroy anything that would change the old order. And when none of the gods dared to face him, Marduk stepped forward, not for glory, but because the order of the universe needed someone who could look chaos in the face and tame it. In Marduk's hands were a bow and arrows, a magic net, and especially the four winds, which symbolized the invisible power that only a true leader could control. When Tiamat opened her mouth to swallow him, Marduk used the four winds to inflate her belly, then shot an arrow straight through her heart, splitting her body in two to form heaven and earth. Marduk did not stop after his victory. He was not a warrior who was drunk on battle. He was an architect, a king, a creator. From the blood of Kingu, he created mankind. From Tiamat's body, he drew a map of the universe. He placed the stars in their proper places, divided the days and nights, established laws, assigned each god a specific task. None too much, none too little. Everything was in order. And most importantly, he doesn't rule by fear, but by responsibility. Sound familiar? Someone who steps out of the shadows, confronts chaos, creates order, and becomes a leader. This archetype is not unfamiliar. From Moses to Harry Potter, from Odysseus to Aragorn, from innovators to digital CEOs, they are all modern Marduks, daring to face the unknown, reorganizing the world, and becoming a leader. That is why Marduk does not exist only in ancient clay tablets. He has existed in the human mind for thousands of years as a model of the ability to transcend chaos and find meaning. You may not have heard of Marduk before, but be honest with yourself. How many times have you faced Tiamat in your life? It can be crisis, insecurity, disorientation, hurt. Every time you dare to look at what scares you, name it, make a plan, and dare to act, you are becoming a little Marduk. You don't need supernatural powers. You need wisdom, courage, and enough insight to stay on track. Before the universe had a name, before time began to tick, before light, there was only one thing: chaos. Not darkness, not nothingness, but an invisible, endless ocean, swirling with rage and instinct. That was Tiamat, mother of all things, the embodiment of primordial salt and unnamed unrest. She was not evil. She was the unnamed, all that was uncontrolled. When Tiamat and Apsu, the goddess of fresh water and order, united, the universe began to take shape. The first gods were born, but like all rebellious children, the young gods were not obedient. They were noisy and chaotic, waking Apsu from his 1,000-year slumber. Apsu decided to destroy his descendants to restore the original order, but he failed and was killed. And so Tiamat went into a rage, not of pain, but of betrayal. She, the representative of the ancient stream, was turned against her own creation. From maternal love, Tiamat transformed into a cosmic dragon. She created an army of monsters, raised Kingu as her general, and began a war to destroy the universe. A war not just against her children, but against the emerging order itself. Marduk, the god who is called when all fears, when darkness spreads across the heavens, when the greatest gods of the universe bow their heads in fear. We see no heroes. We see only fear, something primal, older than the gods themselves, fear of pure chaos. Tiamat was more than just an enemy. She was the mother of all life, the source of all the gods. Killing her was not just an act of rebellion, it was an act of betrayal. So, Enlil turned away. Ea, the god of wisdom, remained silent. Aonu, the king of the sky, backed away. The entire council of gods fell into a stifling silence. No one dared to speak. No one dared to look into Tiamat's eyes, which swirled like an abyss. All hope began to dissipate like the mist before a storm. And then, he stepped forward. A young god, not descended from the ranks of the supreme power. No throne, no royal blood. But on that face was something the gods had forgotten: sanity. His name was Marduk. No one had called him. No one had asked him to step forward. But Marduk understood that if no one did anything, everything would sink. And if the universe was a ship sinking into the maelstrom of chaos, he would be the one to steer it. Marduk looked straight at the council. Without fear, without haste, his voice rang out, low but firm. If I defeat Tiamat, then your power will be mine, forever. A declaration, not a plea. A condition, not a sacrifice. For Marduk knew, order cannot be granted by the weak. It can only be established by those who dare to make conditions with fate. Of course, many of the gods were startled. A young man dared to demand supreme power. But then, as silence fell again, they all realized something painful. They had no choice. Marduk did not ask for weapons. He did not ask for mercy. He asked for the truth that no god dared to face. That without order, divinity is meaningless. As the council nodded in agreement, no one knew it. The universe had entered a new chapter. No longer a place of blood and old gods, but a place where an individual, with courage and reason, could rewrite the entire destiny. In that moment, Marduk became more than just a god. He became the last hope of the universe, and also the one with the heaviest responsibility, confronting the very life that created him. Because sometimes, to rebuild a world, one must stand up to one's own creator, and only those with absolute courage dare to do so. Against Tiamat, the embodiment of primordial chaos, a force without form, without limits, without rules. Conventional weapons are useless. Marduk knows this, and the gods know it too. This is not a simple fight between two individuals. This is a clash between the principle of existence and the unknown, between the emerging light and the rising ancient darkness. Symbol of transcendent power, something no one has ever dared to touch. The great net, not a physical trap. It is an invisible veil that can wrap around the very idea of chaos, capture the uncapable, and constrict the invisible. Marduk will use it not to imprison Tiamat's body, but to strip chaos of its freedom. The silver bow. Each arrow from this bow does more than pierce matter. It pierces the essence of lies, reaching the heart of truth. A weapon for one who possesses not only power, but also a clear vision of right and wrong. When Marduk draws his bow, it is a declaration of truth in action. The thunder hammer, heavy, ancient, and majestic. The hammer is more than just physical force. It is the judgment of cosmic justice, the final mark of a new era. Each swing of the hammer is a declaration that chaos can no longer have free reign. It must bow to a new order. The four winds, east, west, south, north, the most special weapon, formless, impenetrable, but the core of Marduk. Each wind represents a dimension of the world, the basic elements necessary to construct reality. When combined, they form a vortex of control, enveloping every corner, not allowing any piece of chaos to escape order. It was with these four winds that Marduk could do what no one else had done before: force chaos into a framework that even an indeterminate being like Tiamat could not escape. The winds did not just blow, they swirled, they rolled, they tore apart the old reality, making way for a new world to form. When Marduk mounted his thunder-drawn chariot, he was no longer a young god. He was a force of hope, armored with wisdom and the weapons of ancient symbols. The chariot raced toward the dark horizon, where Tiamat awaited not as a mother goddess, but as a sea monster stripped of all love. And that rendezvous point was no ordinary battlefield. It was the place where the boundaries of two poles collided, creation and the end. As Marduk drew his bow, drew his mace, released his wind, and cast his net, the universe held its breath. For what was about to happen would determine whether light would be born, or whether it would be lost forever in Tiamat's bosom. That moment where time stood still, and all things held their breath, was where the universe rewrote its own destiny. Before Marduk stood a shapeless darkness, a huge, hideous dragon, with eyes as deep as the abyss of the soul. It was Tiamat, the mother of all living things. Now, no longer a benevolent embrace, but a living storm, a boundless rebellion of the principle of chaos. No one had ever looked upon Tiamat and lived. But Marduk, far from retreating, advanced, his eyes blazing like the flames, not with anger, but with clarity. He knew he was not fighting a god. He was fighting the nameless unknown of the old world, where there was no form, no voice, where all was aimless frenzy. Tiamat laughed, a laugh that had no joy in it, but only a spirit of contempt. To her, Marduk was but a fool who dared to challenge the primeval ocean. She opened her mouth, not an ordinary mouth, but an abyss that swallowed up the sky, capable of sweeping away all law, all order, all reason. And then Marduk acted. He did not shout, he did not command. He took a deep breath and released the four divine winds into Tiamat's mouth. The four directions of the sky converged into a vortex, blowing straight into her from the inside out. Her belly swelled, as if all the chaos inside her was being compressed, swirled, compressed to the breaking point. And in that moment, when chaos was at its peak, when it seemed as if the universe would be swallowed back into darkness, Marduk drew his bow, an arrow, just one. But it was no ordinary arrow. It was the arrow of choice, the boundary between continuing to drift in chaos or entering a new era of form and order. The arrow pierced Tiamat's heart, the place where all uncertainty was born. She roared, not in pain, but because the old world was falling apart. But Marduk was not done yet. He advanced upon Tiamat's fallen body, mace in hand, eyes unblinking. With a mighty swing, he tore the colossal body in two, and in so doing, he divided the universe for the first time. Her head raised up to form the sky. Her tail pounded down, compacted into the solid earth. Her eyes no longer saw, but poured out the two rivers Tigris and Euphrates, feeding the whole land of Mesopotamia. From her breasts, rain clouds formed, sowing the fields of life. Every piece of Tiamat's body now became the foundational fabric of the new world. Each part of the old chaos was categorized, named, assigned a function, as if Marduk had not only killed Tiamat, but had turned chaos itself into an instrument of order. No more darkness, no more invisibility. From the flesh and blood of a mother dragon, from the ashes of chaos, the first universe was formed, with sky, with earth, with flow, with life, all born from a single arrow, a single choice. Marduk is not just a god who conquered chaos. He is the one who dared to look at the source of all fear and name it. And only when chaos is named, looked at, pierced to the heart, can order truly begin. Marduk's victory over Tiamat was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new burden. Chaos had been defeated, but from its ashes, who would dare to rise up and shake the universe? Who would dare to say, "Thus is the East, thus is the night, thus is the soul of man"? No one, except him. Marduk did not celebrate his victory like a triumphant god. He did not sing or feast. Instead, he quietly began to build the universe. For he knew To destroy chaos is one thing, to prevent its return, that is the truly great thing. From Tiamat's body, he created the heavens, drawing the stars, not as decoration, but as markers of time, as markers of the cosmic memory. Each constellation is a rhythm, a reminder. There was a previous era that was shrouded in chaos, and we must never forget that. He divided day and night, established months and seasons, transformed time from an indefinite flow into a predictable, cultivable, livable sequence. No longer was morning suddenly turning to night. No longer was the sky angry, and people did not understand why. From now on, everything had a reason, everything had a name. But then he realized the gods cannot do everything forever. There must be a race, small enough, but wise enough to understand, with hands enough to sow, and with souls enough to bow to the law. And so, humans were born from the blood of Kingu, the general of chaos, who once led the Dark Legions. It was no accident. It was a paradoxical choice of the universe, to take the blood of those who had rebelled against order, to create the species that would maintain it. Marduk did not create humans to bestow power. He created them to share responsibility, because order never comes by itself. It needs someone to name the unnamed, someone to stand in the darkness and draw light, someone to accept that peace comes only after countless painful choices, renunciations and sacrifices. Marduk was the god who defeated chaos, yes, but more than that, he was the first god to take responsibility for an entire world, not for the sake of glory, but because if no one did, there would be nothing left to hold on to. And that is why, from the ancient Babylonian era to the present day, the image of him, the dragon slayer, the calendar maker, the creator of man, the wind divider, and the bearer of the heavens and the earth, has lived on in the human imagination. You may not have heard of Marduk, but he has never left this world. He lives, not in ancient temples, but in the actions of those who dare to face chaos and do not turn back. Marduk's shadow is not in fallen stone statues, but in the hearts of those who refuse to let darkness reign. When a child stands in the middle of the class, daring to say no to something wrong, knowing that he will be isolated and ridiculed, that is not just courage. It is an arrow shot straight at Tiamat. It is life that dares to face spiritual death. When a father, a mother, a leader faces a crisis, illness, loss, debt, separation, but still stands tall, still cares, still names the pain, and chooses to move on, instead of sinking into despair. They are doing what Marduk did, turning chaos into structure, turning tears into will. Every time a man refuses to let fear control him, but instead looks at it, names it, and walks through it, Marduk is reborn. He is not reborn in chance. He is not reborn in gold. He is not reborn in offerings. He is reborn in action, in choice, in the eyes of those who know that order is not something that comes to us. It is something we must create every day. And you know what? Every time you rewrite your life after a tragedy, every time you rise from a brokenness, every time you pick up the broken pieces to build something better, you are tearing Tiamat apart again, to create a new sky for yourself. That is the essence of myth. Not to tell the past, but to read yourself in the present. Marduk is an archetype, an ancient memory in the collective mind, reminding us that no matter how devastated the world may be, someone still needs to stand up and say, I will lay the first brick. And maybe very possibly, that person, today, is you. Don't wait for a god to save you. Be that god in your own story. Cultural flows from 1,000 years ago to modern impressions. Marduk, the god of storms, of order, of victory over chaos, may have been lost in clay tablets, but his significance has never been lost. On the contrary, he is like a smoldering undercurrent flowing through psychology, theology, politics, literature, right up to our modern lives. The figure of Marduk was Babylon's declaration to the world that no power is permanent unless it carries within it the capacity to create order from ruin. This god ruled not only by authority, but also by wisdom, discipline, and courage. He became the political symbol of every empire, not only because of his victory, but because the legitimacy that came from serving the common order. And so, gradually, over the millennia, Marduk became more than just an ancient god. He became a psychological archetype, a structure in the human psyche that Carl Jung called an archetype, the hero. Carl Jung saw in Marduk an inner metaphor for the journey that every human being must go through in life, from a young, confused self until he has the courage to step out into the world, to confront Tiamat, the symbol of darkness, chaos, and primal fear within oneself. Jordan Peterson, the famous modern psychologist, has likened Marduk to the ultimate symbol of personal growth, not some outside savior, but the fire within each person, enough to see the darkness, name it, and restore order. For him, Marduk's possession of many eyes symbolizes his ability to observe the world with awareness, and his voice that created the world represents the power of language, knowledge, and clarity of thought. That image still resonates somewhere in today's culture. In the superhero stories of Marvel, DC, where ordinary people have to confront the forces that destroy the universe. In the works of fantasy, such as The Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, where order is always threatened by the rise of ancient darkness. Even in every everyday sentence, like, everything must be put back in its place, is a distant echo of the consciousness of Marduk, where modern people still seek control in the chaotic world. Marduk is not just a god of the past. He is a genetic memory, a mystical passage from the clays of Mesopotamia through the long nights of human thought to tell us, if you dare to look into chaos, you are Marduk. What do you think of Marduk, the god who conquered chaos and brought order to the universe? Is there a Marduk in you waiting to awaken? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. If you find this journey inspiring, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future mystical myths, and share it with anyone who is also searching for order in their own lives.